Chapter 25. It was like tiptoeing through clouds. Moistened by the fog, Nick's shirt stuck to his chest. His skin felt slick, and tiny droplets of dew hung like silvery globes in his eyelashes. The swamp was bathed in a pale gray twilight. Nick could hardly believe that it was morning and that somewhere high above hung the sun blazing. Smoke advanced steadily in pursuit of the mother panther, causing now and then to point out a broken sprig, a flattened tuft of grass, or a partial paw print. With each step, the searchers drew closer to the cat, yet remained an unseen phantom, a vapor of imagination. Why is she running, hiding in wait, watching from the brow of the oak? Twilly Spree had removed his lucky necklace because he feared the clicking of the dried buzzer beaks would alert the panther. He stayed at Smoke's heels, carrying a rifle by its stock. The bluish barrel pointed skywards. Marta had dropped back a couple of steps to walk with Mrs. Starch and be near the sleeping kitten. Nick marveled at how quietly the five of them had learned to move together through scratchy brush and sodden marsh, in flood unison, like a centipede or the muscles of a snake. But he also knew the panthers possumed a keen sense of hearing, that a muffled cough or a slight clearing of the throat could spook the cat into flight and might not settle down for miles. Tracking such a weary animal required so much stealth and concentration that Nick's thoughts couldn't stray far, which was a good thing. It would have been a long, restless day of school, hour upon hour, in which to worry about the father lying on the operating table at the military hospital. The cat hunt was a perfect distraction physically and emotionally. Nick had never felt more focused, more absorbed. He had no clue where they were or even what direction they were heading until the boardwalk appeared out of the mist. Smoke abruptly shrank into a crouch, and the others did the same. Twilly signaled urgently for Mrs. Starch to bring the cub to the front of the line. Carrying her straw hat in both arms as if held some rare and fragile treasure, the gangly teacher moved forward in wavering, slow-motion steps. She reminded Nick of the stork sneaking up on a bug. He groped behind him for Marta's hand and tugged her close so that she could see better. Smoke was up again, peering into the bank of fog. Twilly whispered to Mrs. Starch, and she removed the baby panther from a crown of her hat. The kitten stretched its stubby legs and yawned mightily. Then it began to squirm and writhe and thrash, the plump, oversized claws raking Mrs. Starch's arms and forearms. Somehow she got the cat under control, but Nick and Marta were surprised to see so much power in such a small, cute little package. Soon the kitten began to cry, which brought a fond smile to Mrs. Starch and affirming nods from Twilly and Smoke. The crying is what they hoped would draw the mother panther out of the woods, what they hoped would lead her to the cub. But only if she heard it. Smoke said something to Twilly, who stiffened and swung the rifle in a ready position. Nick felt Marta's breath on his neck. Somebody else is out there. No way. Listen, Nick. Voices. Smoke must have heard them too, although Nick didn't. The only sounds that registered in his ears were the meowing of the kittens and the thump-thump-thumping of his heart. When Mrs. Starch released the cub, it scampered a few yards into a small clearing and then sat down abruptly, wide-eyed and bewildered. Twilly motioned for everyone to back away, and then group stand in the young pines where, despite the fog, they still had view of Squirt, a spotted puff of fur on the ground. The little panther cried and cried, yet instinctively it knew not to move, for every twitch might catch the attention of a hawk. "Hurry, Mama Cat," Mrs. Starch murmured, with an aching voice unfamiliar to Nick and Marta. This is not the same person who terrorized them in biology class. "Did you actually see the panther?" Nick whispered to Smoke, who shook his head. "But she's not far." "How do you know?" Marta asked. "There was fresh pea on a fern." "Lovely." Nick said, asked Smoke if he, like Marta, had heard voices. "Yeah, bro, I did," he said apprehensively. Twilly wasn't watching the kitten. He was scanning the trees and the thickets, the gun pulled tightly across his chest. The cub's cries sounded pitiful and small in the great swamp, like squeaks from a stuffed nursery toy. "Don't give up, little guy," Mrs. Starch said. She was clutching her straw hat so furiously it had crumpled in her fist. Marta shut her eyes. Nick figured it was saying a prayer for the baby cat. Her family was very religious, and Marta never missed church on Sundays, Nick thought. A prayer couldn't hurt. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness, and the sounds from the cub became weaker. The cat was getting tired of crying. Not good, Smoke said. Twilly agreed. Let's give it 5 more minutes. The kitten must have heard their whispers, for it pricked its ears and turned its head towards their hiding places in the pines. Mrs. Starch said, "This is breaking my heart." From deep in the fog arose a high-pitched scream, piercing and raw like something from a slasher movie. Twilly froze. Mrs. Starch gasped, and Marta dug her fingernails into Nick's shoulder. "Panther," Smoke said triumphantly. And then came the gunshots. Long after Special Agent Conaway's truck disappeared into the mist, Drake McBride and Jimmy Lee Bayless paced back and forth on the dirt road. They were having an uncomfortable conversation about the future of Section 22 oil scam. "We're doomed," Drake McBride said. "We're toast." "Maybe not. Remember, it's the government," said Jimmy Lee Bayless. "Half of everything they do is half." "No, you heard the man. They're going to have rangers tromping all over the swamp, plus a dog, too. Probably a serious dog. They are bound to find our drilling site," Jimmy Lee said, "and we're doomed." Jimmy Lee Bayless feared that, for once, his boss was right. The officer searching for the Panther would probably find the pirate well first, and then the Red Diamond Energy would be deep in trouble for trying to steal petroleum from the land that belonged to the good citizens of Florida. "You got nothing else to say. That's it," Drake McBride spluttered. "I'm just thinking," Jimmy Lee Bayless said. "Thinking about what? Which of us gets the top bunk in our prison cell?" Actually, Jimmy Lee Bayless was thinking about Mexico. On TV, it looked like a warm and friendly place to live, where nobody asked too many questions. There had to be direct flights from Tampa or maybe Orlando. The question was, he had left his passport back in Texas. Drake McBride rubbed his sore ribs and griped all the way about the rotten luck that had befallen him. "I would have given anything to know who called the feds about the cat. Had to be the same joker that's been messing with Melton." "No doubt," said Jimmy Lee Bayless. His mind flashed back to the spectacle of all those little pink flags, mischievously rearranging to tell the Red Diamond helicopter to scat. Jimmy Lee Bayless hadn't shared the story with his boss. He saw no reason to do so now. "What am I supposed to tell my old man?" Drake McBride lamented. "Tell him to get you a lawyer." "Oh, that's real funny," Jimmy Lee Bayless said. "I'm not joking." Drake McBride kicked at a rock. "It just ain't fair. I told you this whole thing was a bad idea. I warned you, but you wouldn't listen," Jimmy Lee Bayless groused. "Is that right? Well, partner, I recall your squinty little eyes lighting up like the 4th of July when you heard how many jillions of dollars we could make off this operation." Jimmy Lee Bayless leaned against the wet bumper of the truck and mulled the situation over. Removing all the Red Diamond pipes and equipment from Section 22 would take several days, and then the pit would have to be filled. There simply wasn't enough time. Reaching into the pocket of his pants, Jimmy Lee Bayless was dismayed to discover that he was out of Tums again. "Hey, we could always start another fire," Drake McBride suggested, "to stall the game wardens." "Are you serious?" "I'm talking about a big one this time, a real monster." No. A fire that would burn for weeks. We'll keep the flames a couple 100 yards downwind from the drill site. Then we'll sneak in Melton and the boys to clear out our gear and bury the pit. Presto, we're out of the woods." Drake McBride paused. "How come you're looking at me that way?" "Because you just may be the biggest bonehead I have ever met." "What?" "You heard me." In his own mind, Jimmy Lee Bayless was no longer employed by Red Diamond Energy, and therefore he felt free to insult Drake McBride. Never again would he address this numbskull as sir. "You want another wildfire? You do it yourself," he hissed at his ex-boss. Red as a tomato, Drake McBride balled his fist and stepped forward towards Jimmy Lee Bayless, who rose up and pretended to refracture Drake McBride's ribs if necessary. The man stood inches apart, glowering to one another when a blood-curdling yowl let through the fog. It sounded almost human, a cry someone might make after falling into the boiling water. Jimmy Lee Bayless felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. Drake McBride frantically reached into the bed of the pickup truck and grabbed his rifle. Then he wagged recklessly at the curtain of haze. "Give me my gun," Jimmy Lee Bayless said. "Back off," Drake McBride's eyes were gleaming. "That was a panther," he whispered hoarsely. Let's get out of here." "No, it's our only chance." Don't make me hurt you, Jimmy Lee Bayless said. We can't be free of this mess right now with one shot. We can be free of this mess right now with one shot. With the rifle thrust forward, Drake McBride began creeping down on the dirt road in the direction of the scream. Jimmy Lee Bayless followed closely, planning to overpower his brainless ex-boss, snatch the gun, and flee the Black Vine Swamp forever. Surely an experienced oil man could find a decent job in Mexico. You see that, Drake McBride stiffened, slowing his pace. What? Something moved ahead of us, I swear. Jimmy Lee Bayless said, I can't see nothing. But Drake McBride was not imagining ghost. The fog parted and a tawny shape materialized, sleeked and low slung. It was poised on muscled haunches barely 10 yards away. Its pale gold eyes locked on the two startled men. The cat remained motionless except for a twitch of the long, kinked tail. Jimmy Lee Bayless held his breath. Never had he seen such an imperial predator up close. Yet he was more amazed than afraid. The presence of the rare panther was so hypnotic that Jimmy Lee Bayless failed to notice Drake McBride raising the rifle. Instantly, the palmetto exploded next to the cat, which snarled and made two great soaring leaps into the mist. Half crazed with fear and fury, Drake McBride fired 2 more rounds. Jimmy Lee Bayless lunged for the gun, but Drake McBride jerked away, aiming blindly into the shroud trees. But that time, Jimmy Lee Bayless was able to tackle him. Drake McBride had run out of bullets, and heavy and electric silence settled upon the swamp. Twisting the rifle from his ex-boss's hands, Jimmy Lee Bayless said, I ought to leave you out here to rot. Did I hit the dang thing? Drake McBride said. You better hope not. What? You're going to turn me in? I don't think so, Drake McBride said. Now stop this nonsense and help me get up, partner. Both of them jumped at the sound of a metallic click, which was followed by a flat voice. Drop the weapon and stand slowly away with your hands over your head, and I won't say it twice. 2 men stepped out of the fog. One wore a coat and a tie, and he was pointing a clocked revolver at Jimmy Lee Bayless. The other one, dressed in dark blue jumpsuit wearing the Collier County Fire Department. With despair, Jimmy Lee Bayless recognized the second man immediately. It was Torkelson, the arson investigator. He said, Mr. Bayless, I would strongly advise you do what Detective Marshall says. Jimmy Lee Bayless obediently stood up, dropping the rifle as if it were a hot poker. As he raised his hands, he kicked Drake McBride in the butt and growled, You happy now, bozo? Drake McBride rose slowly, clutching his side. If he had been hoping for sympathy from the lawman, he was disappointed. You both are under arrest, announced Detective Marshall. Hold on, Jimmy Lee Bayless said. I want to make a deal. Drake McBride glared at him. I don't believe this. You're going to try and hang me all this time? With pleasure. Gentlemen, please, Torkelson interjected. Give Detective Marshall your full attention. No, sir, brayed Drake McBride, and he ran off crashing through the swamp. The arson investigator and the detective traded shrugs, and they made no move to chase after the president of Red Diamond Energy Corporation. Is he really that stupid? Torkelson asked. 10 times, said Jimmy Lee Bayless, and he held out his wrist for Jason Marshall to handcuff him. End of chapter.